Well, thanks for staying with us on the program this morning. Let's get straight into the conversations. Joining us virtually on the program this morning is the editor of the Daily Courier, the ever mercurial Shenwuni. Hello, Mr. Shenwu. Good morning to you, and thanks for joining us.
Good morning, Mr. Brian. Good to see you again, and good morning to our viewers at home.
Well, let's get straight into the conversation, and we'll start with the bone of contention as it concerns the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination results that recorded a mass failure. You'll recall the last time we were on the program, we discussed some of the challenges that the candidates might have faced up until the moment that the JAMB Registrar admitted that there was indeed a glitch in their systems. Now, there have been efforts to redeem some part of public trust, but it's still with the opposition that this decision has met. Southeast reps are calling for the resignation of the JAMB registrar. They're also urging an outright cancellation of the examinations and the suspension of the IT officials who were overseeing the exam. Let's get your thoughts on these demands by the Southeast reps.
It was a sad incident, an unfortunate one for that matter. A number of issues are actually involved. The future of hundreds of thousands of our students are at stake. The integrity of the admission process. Recollect that the Unified Tertiary Matriculation Examination is the only entrance examination into tertiary institutions in Nigeria as it were today. So the quality assurance of that entry into tertiary institution is actually called to question, as it were. Thirdly, the manner at which with which the glitch happened leaves more to be desired when you had just practically two geopolitical zones being affected, the southeast and primarily Lagos State, which is from the southwest. That leaves a whole lot to be desired. I think, in my opinion, the professor had tried. He's always been in the news for the good reasons, how he brought probity, brought accountability to the JAMB as an institution. But what we saw in the past few days, I think what is actually noble, in my opinion, is that Professor Ishak Oloyede ought to actually resign when this glitch happened, when it was discovered that the glitch was widespread and they needed external auditors to actually pinpoint some of the glitches that had actually happened, in spite of the well-meaning, emotional, well-articulated apology that he tendered. I think what was appropriate in the instance was for him to actually resign so that a more thorough audit of the IT infrastructure of JAMB would be properly, because in his speech, I saw that there was also an attempt to deflate the blame to the outsourced centers. But the magnitude of the glitch is one that there is no way we can have a conversation that we exonerate JAMB as an institution. And so I think the noble thing, in my opinion, was for him to resign, let external assessment of the entire IT infrastructure of JAMB be put under the spotlight so that we don't have a repeat of this. But when you want to use the insiders to see how to do this, what we call damage control, I think it will really will not do the job. And I don't think he needs to wait for House of Reps or anyone for that matter to start raising eyebrow. That's just a noble thing to do. And I know Professor Oloyede is a noble person, and he should just resign so that somebody else can come in, maybe someone who is more internet savvy, to take up the reins of JAMB so that we can have a breath of fresh air. You know, gone are the days when we are looking for just someone who is an erudite professor, highly respected to head JAMB. I think going forward, they need to also look for someone who is internet savvy, who is abreast, because the institution practically has gone high tech, and you needed someone who has a hold on some of the things going on there to be able to do that. I know some people might disagree that you just need the IT sector, but that's the reality. You need someone who can query,
Mr. Shewon,
the right questions.
Mr. Shewon, this calls for resignation, which you are backing this morning. Do you think that it is further heightened by the loss of life of a candidate to suicide and the trauma that several parents and students have suffered, including centers which had their facilities and equipment vandalized by candidates at the moment they experienced that glitch, even during the examination?
Is a sad one. I really don't want to take us that route. I was aware that a lady actually lost her life. I was aware there were a number of people, parents, who actually alluded to the fact that they had wards that have been depressed since the glitch occurred, and their results have been very negative. I'm also aware, like you rightly pointed out, that a number of centers were actually bungled, looted, and the infrastructures there were badly damaged. And this again simply reinforces the reason why the helmsman in JAMB should actually leave. Like I mentioned earlier, he had actually brought a lot of reforms to JAMB. We have now known JAMB to be a body that is high on integrity, a body that will not bend the rules like we usually know before now for VCs and the polytechnic, what do you call them, the head of polytechnics and colleges of education, provosts in the colleges of education and the rest of them. So he had actually brought a number of reforms. But as things really are today, I think he had actually gotten to that limit. He has gotten to his wit end when he just needs to step aside, let a full-blown audit of the IT infrastructure of JAMB be done so that we can breathe some fresh air. Because
now,
as long as it remains...
Let's also review the attempt at a damage control that was made. We're all aware that there might be a timetable clash with preparations for WAEC. And JAMB, in a bid to manage the situation, called for a resit. The resit was hurriedly done, and still there was yet another incident of a technical glitch even during the resit. Now, in terms of damage control and what can be done better, would a cancellation of that resit suffice, owing to the call by the Southeast reps? Or how does the institution JAMB move forward to be able to give those candidates who have been unfairly done by double glitches in the exam another opportunity at entering into tertiary institutions this year?
Brian, to be fair, glitches are part of IT system, but troubleshooting it correctly is the difference between those who have a hold on the entire network of the IT infrastructure and those who don't. That's usually the difference. The most sophisticated IT infrastructures in Silicon Valley usually experience glitches. It's just normal. But how you troubleshoot it is the difference between novice and those who have the right people in the saddle. JAMB, of course, you can't actually take away the civil service syndrome away also from JAMB. We saw it in several of our institutions, like the INEC and several other institutions, like even the paramilitary and the military, where you have people who are there and are just progressing based on just the civil service rule, not so much about their technical know-how. In other words, you might have a director of ICT who is not internet savvy, but who is just director because he's the most qualified person, or is the most qualified person based on civil service rules to be there. And so that's why I think it's appropriate. The damage control, let me paint a picture. There was someone I know who received a test a day to the receipt exam, just trying to put some fact to the troubleshooting that went haywire. He received an SMS a day, 24 hours to the receipt examination. And so quickly, the parents mobilized, got a private transportation so that he could meet up, because it was several kilometers away from where he was resident. They successfully got into the exam center that morning, just barely 45 minutes to the exams. So while he was on the queue to get cleared, he was told that he was not in that center. So quickly he placed a call to the parents, and the parents checked their email, their SMS, and they got another message just barely less than 10 minutes, about 9 minutes before that call came in, that he has been moved from that center to another center in a different town, though it was close by. He was already in that center. So they had to arrange another transportation to move the young boy to the next center. On getting there, he was told that he was in the first batch, I think the 6:30 a.m. batch, and that they had concluded the exams. So he needs to wait for further directives from JAMB. That is unacceptable. That is completely unacceptable. And you can't come from a technical glitch that is so widespread that affected almost about 400,000 candidates. You hurriedly put up a receipt in order to save face, and your receipt is even worse than the original glitch that was experienced. What else are we talking about? But I just think we have this psyche in this climb. Everyone has this redemptive psyche. Something happens, you are in the news for the wrong reasons, you stay put in office, and you are claiming you want to redeem. There's nothing to redeem. He needs to resign. Let somebody else come and see how we can better our IT infrastructure in JAMB.
Now, on the other angle to this conversation is some netizens have also engaged on the verified handle of JAMB on X and expressed dismay and displeasure at the responses that they have gotten from the handler of that page, saying that some of the responses actually lack empathy in light of the situation that parents and candidates are faced with. I don't know if you've been privy to some of those replies and you care to make any comments as to how better the handler of that page could have worded some of the responses to queries and inquiries that they have received online.
Well, Brian, to that, I would just say it's actually not a JAMB issue. It's a national malaise that we have to cure. I have several of my colleagues. I'm a journalist. I'm also privileged to be an associate member of the National Nigerian Institute of Public Relations. A number of our colleagues are out of job, looking for decent jobs to do. And you have most, I use that word MOST, most of the government institutions really don't have professionals handling their communication apparatus. That's the truth. JAMB, for instance, had been in the news before now for posting a grammatically flawed tweet, and when the the attacks start coming in flourish, they quickly run there either to edit or delete such tweets. And it's quite unfortunate. An institution that is the apex platform for bringing students to the ivory towers, and you have the handlers not being able to string decent grammar. That itself is an issue. And so about empathy is a civil service thing. The same way they talk to you physically, when you walk into their offices, they speak to you as if they are doing you a favor. It's also the same tone. It's the same tone they use when they speak or they type on social media. It's just normal. The reason why we are having this conversation is because it's now in the news. You get that everywhere. I have an issue I'm dealing with now. The Nigerian Defense Academy Secondary School in Kaduna, Faka, actually fixed an exam that clashed with the national government Unity College exam the same day. And these are two national institutions. National government colleges are nationwide. Why this one is just somewhere in Africa, in Kaduna? I got wind of it as a journalist and I was working on it. And I tried to reach out to their communications department to see how I can speak to the leadership of. I was insulted, I was called names, and I just started laughing that, come on. I was just trying to get information so that I can speak to the leadership so that the right thing can be done. Somehow I got their WhatsApp platform and I went there, asked questions. Instead of getting response to my question and inquiry, what I got was a beat back from somebody who is supposed to be an official handler of the school's WhatsApp page. So this thing is widespread. I just hope that institutions like the NIPR can begin to put their fruits on the ground, insisting that government will start hiring professionals to help them communicate with the public. That way, you speak with empathy, you speak professionally, you speak with a measure of courtesy, and you'll be able to project these government institutions in a good light.
Now, Mr. Shehu, earlier in your remarks as we began the conversation, you cited the fact that JAMB remains probably the only authorized gateway into tertiary institutions in the country. In keeping with the provisions of our constitution in section 18(1) of the 1999 constitution that says that the government should direct all its policies towards ensuring that there is equal opportunities for education for all, do you think that going forward, in a bid to unbundle this issue, universities should also be saddled with the mandates of setting up post-UTME exams, much like we see in some private universities, so that candidates who have the minimum 5 credits sitting can, through that means, acquire admission?
Sadly, Brian, I think we shouldn't go that route. We have tried it before, and we know how it panned out. What we had when universities were even given the privilege of doing more like a graded exam after the UTME. Remember what was notoriously called post-UME at the time. What we noticed was that first, there was extra burden on Nigerians. All universities, polytechnics started charging very exorbitant prices for people to sit for post-UTME. Secondly, we now discover that the usual Nigeria factor came in, where discretion rather than academic excellence as basis for admitting people was still the order of the day. And so we can't go back to those days where some dons in our universities will just sit down and determine how many slots we go to lecturers, go to professors, and go to politicians, and now give a percentage from JAMB and just do those type of things. I think that's not the right thing to do. And we have chosen to go the way of best practices like the United States, where, it was just a few days ago that the May timeline for receiving your invitations, whether you're admitted to tertiary institution, especially university, Ivy Leagues in the US, closed. That is the best practice. There is a gatekeeping institution that tests these people. So institutions will now, based on their current capacity, will determine whether they want to receive these people, that these more like gatekeepers are sent to them. So when they are not able to receive them, they can now send it to institutions like you rightly mentioned, private institutions who can now lower their benchmark and receive these people. But I don't think government institutions should go that way. It will really not pan out well.
Now let's move on to another issue, but yet still within the academic sector, is the challenge with 50 billion naira as allocated by the federal government, which has put some of the unions at a loggerhead. ASUU, SSANU and NASU reportedly disgruntled over the sharing formula of this money from the FG. What's your take on this development?
It's a perennial problem. And you always have this rivalry between academic staff union of university, the senior staff association of Nigerian universities, and the non-academic staff union of Nigerian universities. So you always have this rivalry. When resources come to the Ivy Leagues, you always have ASUU being the most vocal, trying to take a larger chunk, and SSANU and NASU are always kicking. But the solution for me is that we must begin to have a tertiary institution that is financially independent. We're talking about autonomy of universities, but whenever we discuss this issue, it's still the people in these elite associations, ASUU, SSANU, NASU, that usually want to try to play down that we are not ripe, we are not this, we are not that. But I think when you have monies like that coming in, you always have this type of fiasco that we're having. But when universities are now autonomous and they know exactly what's coming in, I think they will be able to sit better rather than always being in the news because of sharing of backlog of allowances owed to them. So it shouldn't be that difficult. They know their numbers, they know the percentages that should go to them, but perennially it's always in the news, and it's sad. The ivory tower is supposed to be a role model for the community, what we usually call the gown and the community relationship. But what we have seen is that they've not really been good models to our community. Simple thing as money, they can't handle it. Simple thing as attracting development into this Ivy League, we have not seen it on a scale that is so encouraging in a very long time. Every focus is on what government can give them, and we have professors of this, professors of that. I don't think it's really good for our educational sector, to be frank.
Now, does the National Salary Incomes and Wages Commission have a say in this matter? And taking note of the debates earlier on as it concerns the IPPIS and the Consolidated Public Service Salary Structure that have been much debated on in terms of their implementation at the tertiary level of our education.
I think this what you raise now are like three different things. These are end allowances, the backlog of end allowances. And so government is now releasing it so that the people who are involved, academic and non-academic, can now have a chunk. I think it's not all, but just a chunk of what they are being owed, the backlog. So what we have seen over time is that when resources like this come, ASUU wants X percentage. SSANU says no. If you take that percentage, the percentage that goes to us will be too low. And then NASU also will have a say. So that's on one side. The Salaries and Wages Commission, I think where they come in is on the salary emolument. And so that's on another side. And for now, I don't think there's an issue. Now, the third leg that you raised is whether they should remain on IPs. And that conversation, I think, is ongoing. The federal government had actually thrown back the challenge at them. We want you to be on IPs. But what are the constraints? What are the things that you think are not good enough for you on IPs? Give us suggestions how we can improve on it so that the conversation will not be you living at peace, but how do we modify, ensure that our peace platform is more encompassing, and it will factor in some of the demands that you have raised. And I think that's the junction that they are now, and that's the right thing government needed to do. I think our Ivy Towers should actually be a place for thinkers, a place for researchers, a place for people who bring innovative ideas. And so if government had developed a platform, the onus is on the tertiary institutions to critique it and also provide updates that can help that platform to get better, not the call for the platform to completely be destroyed. And I think that's the junction we are now.
All right, then, let's move away from the education sector and the issues greeting our table this morning. And let's look at the issue of insecurity and its regional peculiarity. In the Southwest this morning, the Southwest governors have been called into question in terms of their approach to stemming the tide of insecurity as it pertains to bandits and headers whose invasion, according to a report, is said to be threatening the level of food security and productivity by 40% in that region. Over time, they've been applauded for their approach deploying Amotekun, but to hear that it is threatened by over 40%, does this come as some sort of worry or an alarm to you?
It's not just worrying. I think it's an alarming situation. And the reason why the livestock ministry was actually founded was to ensure that issues around herders and the farmers' clashes, among several others, can be nipped in the bud. But what we have seen in the past few weeks is an escalation. We heard in the news just yesterday, day before yesterday, how the governor of Borno, for instance, was practically in a teary eyes asking government to quickly come to the rescue of a major city in Borno Mate, not to fall in the hands of insurgents. I really thought we had gone past that type of situation. Of course, I really don't want to go into the flurry of lives that have been lost on the Plateau and in Benue State due to this same issue. Now we are having the Southwest also crying and asking the security handlers to quickly come to the rescue, or else we risk going back to where we were about 2 years ago, when prices of virtually every product skyrocketed. And we are even having, we had to, I read the news this morning, the past 4 quarters is only 1 quarter that we had a dip in importation of food material. Though in the fine details, it shows clearly that it was the industrial sector that accounted for the increase in import. I think the industrial sector had over 40, I think about 46, 47% of the food import into the country. But that also tells us that if our farms are secure, we will have farmers who can leverage their capacity to produce and sell to industries. So it's going to be a win-win. Our industrial sector, we have cheap raw materials. Our farmers, because they scale, we have more resources, and farming will become profitable in Nigeria. So this is a call to the federal government, who are in charge of security, to ensure that every part of Nigeria is safe. So it's not actually a Southeast issue, it's a Nigeria issue. This, we have had this conversation for too long. Where headers, we have a free reign on people's farm. People will labor. I told you here, I had an experience last year. I wanted to go into commercial farming, and they went there, messed up the whole thing. My maize farm, my beans farm, and my potato farm were completely routed, and the harvest was very terrible. So I can empathize with what the Southwestern governors are talking about.
Now, The other angle to this conversation is irregular migration. Just over the weekend, a video went viral on social media where residents of Lagos Island were questioning a massive influx of young Nigerian youths, presumably from Katsina State, where they said they were coming in to Lagos to seek jobs from Dangote refinery. It's been pointed to as a case study of how unabated irregular migration can in some ways fuel insecurity, with the popular adage that the idle mind or the idle hand is the devil's workshop. I don't know if it correlates to the issue on ground on how to stem the tides of some unidentified persons with spurious claims as to why they are migrating in droves to certain parts of the country.
You know, this is a complex web, if I must say, Mr. Brian. It's a complex web. Because when you use that term irregular migration and you want to use it for internal migration, scholars had actually differed on that count. If somebody is moving from Katsina to Lagos, for instance, to job hunt, it's a bit difficult to term that irregular. I know the type of issue we experienced a few weeks ago when people were moving through Edo State. You remember that very sad incident that happened in Edo State.
In Urumi, to be specific.
Yeah, Urumi, and they were massacred. You know, the following day, most of us in the dailies, we use that term irregular migration too. But I think it's a bit complex when someone who is, and the Constitution allows for free movement of persons from one part of Nigeria to another. If we now use the term irregular, I think that is not fair. But we now have an issue. Remember that the battalion head somewhere in Plateau a few days ago told us that they've also observed from their initial investigation that most of the attacks on the Plateau were actually not done by citizens of Nigeria. And so there is a larger issue, and it's this Sahel crisis on our hands, where Burkina Faso, what are their names again?
Mali and Niger.
Mali and Niger decided to go on their own outside of the ECOWAS arrangement, where border policing and security used to be a shared responsibility. We had a joint military arrangement to ensure we secure our borders. Even while we were working jointly, we had our hands full with not just terrorists, we have bandits and a whole lot of insecurities across our borders. Now, we now have a situation where nations are now guarding their borders on their own. So when we thought we are done, they rush to other countries. You heard what happened also last week, where these bandits and terrorists attacked Burkina Faso. You know, they have a way of not wanting that also to be in the news, and they had over 200 of their military guys were actually slaughtered and murdered in cold blood. And so is something that is just beyond what we can just sit on the table and be having this conversation about. But the primary responsibility of government is actually the security of lives and properties. And so this excuse cannot be shoved to people who are seated ECOWAS. Our government must think inwards and find a way to mitigate this issue. But back to the question again on migration is a global issue. Whether regular or irregular, we always have the complex means of migration issue. And Lagos, for instance, had always been bedeviled, and that's why it's a sorry issue. When people who migrated from their state to Lagos now goes on social media and start insulting Lagos, the infrastructures are bad, the infrastructures are these, but the pressure of migration. And the thing about internal migration is that it's a bit difficult to plan. You know, I can just wake up tomorrow morning and say I'm going to Lagos, I'm going to Port Harcourt. Unlike when you are traveling into another country, for instance, you know, they've been able to do a trend of who comes in, when they come in, quarterly, annually. They've done it short term, medium term, long term, so they can plan. But it's a bit difficult when it comes to internal. And that's where our security has to be bolstered. And I must commend the federal government, who also had gone a step further to now employ what they call a forest guard. I think that's also another layer. So we just need to have this layer, and also to encourage the sub-government to ensure that local government is awakened. There is that community policing that we have lost. We have to regain it. That is the first layer of security, and we can't leave it. As long as we leave it, we will have this insecurity continue to escalate across the country.
Well, I must applaud your in-depth analysis, especially as it regards the phrase irregular migration. I was just looking at a report as earlier published by the New Telegraph newspaper on the efforts of the federal government to intensify border surveillance with the deployment of e-border tactics. They also reported that over 100,000 irregular migrants have been repatriated under the year in review. How would you assess our border control towards our fight against insecurity?
If I should assess it, I would say it is very dismal. It's terrible. And it's ridiculous that a nation of over 200 million people would keep on sloganeering. And it's a bad thing for us. This issue of what do you call it? E-border patrol has been in the news, at least that I can remember now, for a decade. But what we have been hearing is people talking it. We have not seen concrete action in that regard. We should begin to see our immigration officers use drone, use high-tech technology to police our borders. But you will see them yearly. They say this is a plan we have. I could recollect that when the Minister of Interior came into the saddle, one of his agenda for the borders, our porous borders, as we like calling them, is that we are not going to rely on conventional boots, that is physical people, to police our borders. That we're going to see how we can now deploy technology to ensure that we police our borders properly. Up till now, it's just slogan. We've not seen real actions that can help us have possibly a command center. And we have drones. So when these people are coming in, we already have an idea and we can neutralize them or push them back, as the case may be. That's what decent nations, that's what they are doing. And I don't think these things are casting stones. They are not.
Now, as we move on, let's touch more on one more topic before we say our goodbyes this morning. And it's based on the projections going into 2027. Yesterday, we had comments from the coalition camp, with the proponents led by former VP Alhaji Atiku Abubakar offering Mr. Peter Obi a vice presidential ticket to run alongside him in 2027. This morning, we're seeing replies coming in from Mr. Peter Obi, who says that the only coalition he's looking forward to is one that ends bad governance and addresses hunger and poverty. I don't know what you make of this major talks ahead of 2027 and the responses that we're getting in regards to who is forming mega parties with who and who is whose running mate.
Sadly, I have been one of the people who had always said that politicians are not looking for coalition to better the lots of Nigerians. Politicians are looking for coalition because they've been out of power. The starch dollars are draining fast. The Naira accounts are not smiling again. So they are looking for a back channel to go back pillage a public till and have money to waste. And the statement from the parties involved had clearly shown that. I'm happy that Mr. Peter Obi came out to actually state his own position. For instance, the opposition PDP is in the ICU today because of this same attitude. Let us take power, let us do this. And that was why the party has practically lost track. And all effort to bring it together had failed. All the efforts to bring the PDP together has failed. The committee by Bukola Saraki that was set up a few days ago, they are not making any inroad because instead of digging out of the trenches, they are actually going deeper and deeper into the holes. And so Nigerians just have to smell the music. It's just between half a dozen and 6. So 2027, like every other thing, will soon be here. And so we must just know that these guys are not coming because of any policy initiative. They are not coming to do anything that we have never seen before. We might just have a group of people who are coming together more like let's find a way to unseat our enemy and also have our own free day. So that's that for me. But I really don't see the coalition working because you can see the backlash since yesterday on the social media, in the conventional media. Everyone had come out full throttle to put politicians in their place. So some will run, they will beat back, and I really don't see the coalition doing anything serious into 2027.
Well, Mr. Shenwoni, we must thank you for lending your thought to the issues in the news this morning. We appreciate you for always beckoning on us and reciprocating our beckons when we need to discuss national issues.
Always a pleasure being on ADBN, and thank you for the great job you are doing. Do have a great day. Thank you.
You too.